What are the Antichrist's ethnic origins? Is he European, American, Jewish, Islamic? Or will he be something so unexpected it's going to shock you? This is Bible teacher Nelson Walters, and today we're presenting a theory based on the full weight of Bible evidence, not just one verse here or there that you have never seen before, but which I think is closer to the truth than what we've been taught before. With the Antichrist likely being revealed and coming to power in maybe only 3 or 4 years, every Christian who is watching and awake needs to pay attention like never before to those signs. Back in the days when bestsellers like Late Great Planet Earth or Left Behind came out, the Antichrist's ethnic origins were interesting from an academic point of view. Now, you and I possibly having the chance to face him in the next couple years, it becomes a matter of spiritual life and death. To which the knee-jerk reaction is always, hey, I'm pre-trib. I'm not going to face him. Well, if we can be wrong about the ethnic identity of Antichrist, we can all be wrong about the rapture as well. We should always hedge our bets and plan that maybe we will have to face him, even if we believe in a different rapture theory. So today we're going to break out our Bible shovels and dig deep into what the Bible says about this issue, because ethnic identity is a very important part of identifying him prior to his revealing at the abomination of desolation, the event where he sits in the temple of God and declares himself to be God. Ethnic identity is something you cannot change. It's inherent within him. He's always going to have the same identity. There have been several very famous debates about this topic in the recent past. Prophecy teacher Joel Richardson, father of the Islamic Antichrist theory, seemed to have been at the center of both debates. The Islamic versus Roman Antichrist debate with Dr. Thomas Ice, and the Islamic versus Jewish Antichrist debate with Chris White. Some of these debates got really rather heated, with one or more of the debaters implying that the other one was a heretic, unchristlike, or even satanic. Here is an exchange between Ice and Richardson. Ice was asked if Richardson was a heretic, and here was his answer.
How do you consider his views after even hearing him at this open session?
Historically, heretical refers to people that do not agree with church creeds. I believe his view is unbiblical because it's not what the Bible teaches.
But he never really said Joel wasn't a heretic. And Joel and a lot of people in the audience certainly took that in a negative way. Here's his answer.
I don't think it's Christ-like. I don't think it's mature. I don't think there's any room for that kind of language, for that type of rhetoric. If you want to disagree, defend your position biblically.
And here is Richardson's attack on White's position.
It is the Jews that are the greatest culmination of satanic deception that mankind has ever known. Friends, again, this view is not simply unbiblical. It is satanic. And as such, it should be rejected.
That goes to show you how emotional this topic can be. And the reason the debaters were so demonstrative about this topic was the importance they placed on it, so that the people of God were not deceived by misidentifying the man of sin. This is so important right now also because dozens of Antichrist candidates are on the scene, from Donald Trump to Mohammed bin Salman to King Charles to the Pope, and a very concrete way of identifying the real one is by his ethnicity. Ethnicity, as we said, is something you have from birth and cannot change. But let's start at the very beginning. What did the early church fathers think about where the Antichrist came from and his ethnic identity? The two earliest fathers with opinions on this were Irenaeus and Hippolytus, and they were unanimous about this, associating him specifically with the Israelite tribe of Dan. This is important because these early church fathers, in particular, were the closest to the apostles and their opinions on this. Irenaeus was a student of Polycarp and actually met the Apostle John, and Hippolytus was his student. Irenaeus' direct quote on the Antichrist and Dan was, quote, "Moreover, this Antichrist is to come." So he's saying it wasn't something in the past like Nero. "Not as Christ did, from the tribe of Judah, but from Dan, as it is written, Dan is a lion's whelp, and he shall leap out of Bashan." End of quote. And that's from Against Heresies, Book 5, Chapter 3, Verse 2. Reasons given by Irenaeus were that Dan was the serpent tribe. Irenaeus referred to Genesis 49:17, where Jacob prophesies about Dan. Dan shall be a serpent in the way, an adder in the path that bites the horse's heels, so that his rider shall fall backwards. Genesis 49:17. Since Satan is linked to the serpent, the son of the serpent then would be as well. Irenaeus also noted that the tribe of Dan is missing from the 144,000 who are sealed in Revelation 7. The 144,000 are the list of 12 tribes in Revelation 7, 4 through 8, where 12,000 are sealed from each tribe. But Dan is missing, and he interprets this as evidence that the Antichrist would arise from Dan, and therefore Dan would be omitted. But there was a problem with the tribe of Dan. Hippolytus, Irenaeus' student, agreed with the teacher, for it is certain that Dan is the tribe in which the tyrant and king, the dread judge, the son of a devil, shall be born. Notice he also is saying this is a future Antichrist, and from which he shall arise. From On Christ and Antichrist, chapter 14. However, he added the subtle difference that he thought the Antichrist would come out of the Gentile, Roman government system by interpreting the fourth beast of Daniel as the Roman Empire. So Hippolytus thought the Antichrist would be both a Jew and part of the Gentile government, both at the same time. Let that sink in a little bit when we think we know what the Antichrist's ethnic origins are. Let's explore that theory a little further because it never comes up in modern scholarship. What is the history of the tribe of Dan? The tribe of Dan was one of the 12 tribes of Israel, descended from Dan, the fifth son of Jacob, through his concubine Bilhah. The Danites were originally given a portion of land in the central coast plain of Israel, over by the Mediterranean Sea. But they struggled to secure the land because the Philistines actually drove them out of the land. Due to those difficulties, the tribe of Dan migrated north to seek a new homeland in the north near Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is the area Jesus called the gates of hell, and it is also where the Watchers were said to have descended to the earth. So Dan moved to one of the most evil spots on the planet. After settling there, they set up their own idolatrous shrine to the foreign gods of that region. And after the kingdom split, King Jeroboam I established a golden calf to worship there in Dan. Dan became a major center of false worship, directly opposing the temple in Jerusalem. So Dan was associated with apostasy right from the very beginning. This idolatry continued until the Assyrian exile. You have probably heard about that. The Assyrian king, Tilgath-Pileser III, invaded northern Israel in 732 BC. And the city of Dan was among the first to fall because it was at the most northernmost position of all of Israel. The Assyrians deported the Danites and other northern Israelites into Assyrian-controlled regions. And this is very important too, in places like Habor, by the river Gozan, and the cities of the Medes. We see this in 2 Kings 17 and 1 Chronicles 5. The Danites, along with other 10 lost tribes, then disappeared from history as a distinct group after this exile. So they were Jewish, but they ended up in Assyrian territory. As we continue to work through this issue of ethnic origin, that's important. But they were not, perhaps, off God's radar. As we mentioned in a previous video last year, the number of the horns on the beast, 10, matches the lost northern tribes. The number of horns on the false prophet, 2, matches the southern tribes. So it is possible that the 10 horns or 10 kings, although they are now Gentiles, have Israelite genetics because of the intermixing of the lost tribes with the Assyrians. Dan in particular, because its association with the area around Mount Hermon, might even have intermixed with non-human genetics, watcher genetics. Now, this is only a theory. We're just putting that out there. But if there is one person who most likely will exhibit this type of mixed genetics, it's the Antichrist. The area where the Danites were taken into captivity is also suspicious. The Assyrian Empire. In Micah 5:5, the Antichrist is referred to as the Assyrian. Isn't that interesting? And a few verses later, it talks about being the land of Nimrod, the infamous first world leader who built the Tower of Babel. This also perfectly matches this theory. So a Gentile from the region that stretches from the Golan Heights, where Mount Hermon is, north as far as Turkey, the Assyrian Empire's stretch, is the most likely area for this evil person to have his roots. As far as I know, this is a brand new theory on the ethnic origins of the Antichrist, and it aligns perfectly with the theory of Hippolytus, someone genetically related to the tribe of Dan, but who grew up as a Gentile and probably isn't practicing Judaism, or who might not even know his genetic roots. If this is true, it makes all those arguments about a Jewish or Islamic Antichrist pretty meaningless, doesn't it? Especially if you're going to call somebody satanic over it. Imagine if all those insults that were hurled back and forth about this topic were about a subject in which both parties were actually correct, partially correct. I think we should get back to a lot less emotion about our end-time theories myself. There may be many instances where we are both correct and don't know it. Yet we hold on to our preconceived notions as if we're the only ones who could be right. But you might be saying, hey, wait a minute. You are missing a most clear-cut biblical evidence, Daniel 9:26, the clue that tells us who the people are, and that clue tells us they were Romans, not Middle Easterners. We discussed this in our video, The Antichrist Checklist. Daniel 9:26 provides us with a famous but misunderstood prophecy about this. And after the 62 weeks, an anointed one, and that's Jesus, shall be cut off and shall have nothing. That was the crucifixion, his death on the cross. And the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the city and sanctuary. From this we learn that the people of the prince who shall come, likely the Antichrist, will destroy Jerusalem and the temple, and that happened back in AD 70 when the Roman legions leveled Jerusalem to the ground and burned the holy temple. Jesus' well-known prophecy from Matthew 24:2 tells us that not one stone of that temple building would be left upon another. Daniel tells us that the prince who is to come will eventually enforce the covenant for 7 years. So it's that prince. And it's his people who did this. We know that Titus, who was the Roman general in charge at that time, did not make a 7-year covenant at that time. So we can say for sure it wasn't Titus. So the prince is a future prince, just like Hippolytus and Irenaeus thought, a prince yet to come, most likely the Antichrist. And it is his people who destroyed the temple and city. Now, the Hebrew word for people in this verse is Am, which carries an ethnic connotation to it. It literally says the ethnic group of the prince are those who destroyed the temple. Now, knee-jerk reaction of most scholars, which you probably were alluding to when you said, hey, look at this verse, is to say, see, the Antichrist will be a Roman, an Italian. They were the Roman legions who did this. And that is possible, but it's not the only possibility because there were other ethnic groups present in the Roman armies that did the destroying. In fact, they were the majority. The Italians were a minority. Scholar Joel Richardson, who we spoke of earlier in this video, did a lot of research on the ethnic makeup of the 4 Roman legions that invaded Israel. Roman legions involved in the invasion were ethnically diverse, as we said, not strictly Italians, including large contingents from the Middle East. The 10th Legion was originally raised in Italy, but by AD 70 it contained significant numbers of recruits from Syria and Turkey. The 5th Legion likely included mostly Greek and Balkan soldiers. The 12th Legion had mostly Turkish and Armenian recruits, and the 15th Legion, that had been stationed in the Middle Eastern provinces before the siege, was made up almost entirely of Syrians and Greeks. Beyond the legions, there were auxiliary forces that played a crucial role in the siege too, and these included Arabs, Syrians, Edomites, Philistines. Josephus, the Jewish historian who chronicled the war, noted in his book, Wars of the Jews, that the temple in Jerusalem itself was set on fire by soldiers from the eastern provinces, likely Syrian and other auxiliaries. So Middle Easterners are just as likely or more likely than Italians as the ethnic group of the Antichrist based on Daniel 9:26. So from this passage, the group of ethnic possibilities for Antichrist are either Southern Europeans or Middle Easterners, with Middle Easterners being more likely because the Antichrist is called an Assyrian in Micah 5:5. And the little horn, another name for the Antichrist, comes out of Alexander the Great's former empire in Daniel 8:9. So it really concentrates it on that area north of Israel, but ending at about Turkey. But the beast is Roman, so many will say. Rome is a city in Italy. But the Roman Empire was much, much more expansive than a single city. And in 395 AD, the empire was divided into 2 halves. You may know this, the Western Empire and the Eastern or Byzantine Empire. The Byzantine Roman Empire was just as Roman as the Western Roman Empire based in Rome. And it lasted 1,000 years longer. I think those of us in Western world allow our biases about, everything comes from the West to overshadow the historical facts when we think about where the Roman Empire actually was. And that then influences how we interpret prophecy. So how do we apply this new theory that the Antichrist might be Jewish genetically from the tribe of Dan and a Gentile? Theories can be interesting, but unless we apply them, then they really aren't valuable, are they? The purpose of knowing the Antichrist's ethnic origins is part of the way we identify the man of sin prior to him sitting in the temple of God and declaring himself to be God. Once that happens, every Bible-understanding Christian will know who the Antichrist is. But before the abomination, we need to know this information. Click right here for a checklist of 7 prophecies that help us identify him today. We talked about this video. We then apply this checklist to the leaders of the world today and show why some could or couldn't be the Antichrist. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.